Our next speaker and one to close out today's forum is Robert Knežević. Please join me in welcoming Robert.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to start today by taking a little bit of a survey. How many of you know and recognize this song? Come on, don't be shy.
Can you tell me how to get to Sesame Street?
Most people recognize the Sesame Street theme song. I have one more question. How many of you recognize this song? Notice who's raising their hands. Ifta Ya Simsim, the first Arabic adaptation of Sesame Street that aired in the region in the 1980s. I could play you 30 more of these local language theme songs, and I almost guarantee you that someone in this audience will raise their hand in recognition because they've either grown up on this song, on a local Sesame adaptation, or know somebody who has grown up on a local Sesame adaptation. Sesame Workshop is a shared childhood experience across almost every country in the world. And I have had the privilege for the last 17 years to be gathering and convening educators, producers, writers, funders, and helping them create some of these local language adaptations of Sesame Street. And there are so many stories I can tell you, but as you all know, in any career, there is one story that is a defining moment, and I'd like to share that with you today. The year is 2000, and Takalani Sesame, the South African adaptation of Sesame Street, begins broadcast on SABC, the national broadcaster. It is a moderate success. Kids are watching it, it's getting good ratings, and our research shows that they are learning their letters and numbers. No different from any other Sesame Street around the world. But then, in the year 2002, as renewal time comes along, our South African partners gather in Johannesburg, some 30 people, producers, writers, directors, SABC, the Ministry of Education, to determine what is the next content plan for the series. And something interesting happens. A groundswell of emotion and a unanimous conclusion by all of our South African partners gathered in that room that Takalani Sesame must address the most daunting issue facing South Africa of that day, the scourge of HIV and AIDS. Now you might say, a preschool program talking to 4-year-olds about HIV and AIDS? How can that be possible? Well, this is the beauty of Sesame Street. We accept the challenge. Our year-long process brings together experts in child development, education, and health, and results in the first ever early childhood, age-appropriate early childhood curriculum on HIV and AIDS education. Its purpose is to reduce fear and stigma, to teach acceptance, to promote basics of health and hygiene, and to help break the culture of silence that grips South Africa during those days around the disease. The curriculum also results in the birth of a small 4-year-old little girl Muppet by the name of Cammy, who happens to be HIV positive. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the world's media takes note.
Sesame Street changed children's television in this country, finding a way to be both educational and entertaining to children and the parents often watching with them. It is a show that tries to introduce children from all walks of life to all kinds of issues facing the world they grow up in, no matter how controversial sometimes those issues might be.
That summer, July of 2003, A little girl by the name of Cami that lives on Takalani Sesame in South Africa changed the world's discourse on HIV and AIDS and brought attention to orphans and vulnerable children, not just in South Africa, but around the world. I can tell you about Hoha in Egypt and her effort to fight illiteracy by educating young girls. I can tell you about Kareem in Palestine and his mission to empower young boys. I can tell you about Boomba in India, about Chamki in Bangladesh, but you get the picture. So you may be wondering what I am doing here in Abu Dhabi. Well, that brings me back to that little song.
افتح يا سمسم أبوابك نحن الأطفال افتح واستقبل أصحابك نحن الأطفال.
As we speak, there are writers, producers, educators debating, arguing, brainstorming, and creating the new 21st century version of Ifta Ya Simsim right here in Abu Dhabi. The program goes into studio at the amazing 2454 facilities in January, and it is supported by a visionary social investment by Mubadala. Sesame Street, or rather Ifta Ya Simsim like Sesame Street, is no longer just a television program. It is a multimedia education initiative, online, on tablets, on cell phones, and of course on good old-fashioned books. It will premiere in September of 2015 to coincide with back to school, and its educational curriculum, as determined by Arabic educators, is Arabic literacy and healthy lifestyles. And of course, Ifta Ya Simsim will bring back some old, familiar characters back from the 1980s and introduce some new characters to the cast of Ifta, or as I like to call them, Muppet ambassadors from the longest street in the world. So I'd like to leave you now with a short video that, for me, speaks to the enduring legacy of Sesame Street.
Probably 3-4 times a week.
When I was around 10 or 11.
I went through a big Cookie Monster phase. I had a Cookie Monster finger puppet.
I like Mr. Noodle, Abby Cadabby, and Dorothy, Elmo's goldfish. Yeah, I love Mr. Noodle.
I kind of really loved Grover because he was such a goofball.
Chunky, Boomba, Banjo.
Oh, Oscar the Grouch.
He wasn't treated badly. Everybody was just kind of like, he's crabby.
I like Abby because she turns people into pumpkins.
What's so weird about being turned into a pumpkin? Nothing.
The counting vampire.
1, 2, I was just with the count. I have a terrible ear for impressions.
I really love Snuffleupagus.
I loved Bert and Ernie.
Of course, Big Bird.
As you got to learn his character, he just was just this giant bundle of, it's kind of cheesy, but love.
What kind of things did it teach you?
Letters.
They taught me about counting.
Numbers and words.
The alphabet.
How to put on a jacket.
How to sign the alphabet from watching Sesame Street. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, etc., etc.
Bruce करते वाला. मुझको चमकी की तरह strong बनना है.
Paciencia, tolerancia.
Being nice to people, respecting people, treating others with dignity.
I was in the foster system, and I hadn't actually learned to read until I was 5 or 6. But I think it was watching Sesame Street that made me realize that I really wanted to learn how to read.
It's like a lot of personal issues too, because I remember when I was growing up watching Sesame Street is when the Mr. Hooper died. You know, life happens, and here's how you handle it.
But they dealt with it in a way that still felt not scary, you know?
I was a farm kid in the middle of Nebraska, in the middle of nowhere. I didn't have a stoop to sit on. I didn't have a street to learn anything from.
I love the idea of a big city with a lot of diversity
and that show was the way to go there.
One of the reasons I found Sesame Street so fascinating is because there were people on the show who weren't white, and I'd never seen that before.
People of all color skin, characters of all color fur, and that was just one big happy neighborhood.
And it actually taught me that it's okay to look like me, because other people do, and people should accept you for that. So I think that's, it's just true.
It shows like everybody's different, and not everybody's the same. It's their individuality that counts.
You think this stuff on the show just kind of sticks with you?
Yeah, all the things that I've watched on there have stuck with me all my life.
Robert, thank you. Part of Mubadala's mandate is